Hey everybody, welcome to the tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about building this grid list kind of collection list layout with GSAP Flip in Webflow. So we click this button and it clicks from a list layout to a grid layout. And it's gonna, if we get time, I'll talk about how to respect the reduced motion preference. So you see I toggled on reduced motion and the animation goes away. And then also be talking about how to use local storage to store the user's state as well, so that if I copy and paste this into a new tab, we get some grid.
That's effing sweet.
Okay, so the way I want to go about it today is first I'm going to talk about the build in Webflow. I'm not going to spend too much time there. There's only a couple key items that we need to touch on. And then I will hop into the code. The first thing we'll do is code it up without any GSAP so that you can do this and know the JavaScript that's going on behind the scenes. And then we will start implementing the GSAP Flip library to get it done. And as we have time, we will get that reduced motion preference in there as well as the local storage. So let's hop into it. Okay, here in Webflow here, pretty simple project. I just have under the body, I have a custom styles. All this is doing is I'm setting the aspect ratio on the image class. So let me get the zoom right there. And that's to set the aspect ratio on these images. And then I have a section, padding, container, padding wrap, top wrap. This just has a button in here. I think I put an ID on it, a flip button. Yep, so notice that. That is important. Come over to the styles here. I'm not going to talk about the styles on the button because that doesn't matter. And then we've got our collection list here. So you can see I built a collection called dinosaurs. I thought these pictures were kind of cool. Grab them from Unsplash, Cup of Couple. So appreciate those pictures that I got for free from Cup of Couple. And coming back into Navigator here, we'll go at our collection list wrapper, look at the layout. So we have a class of layout on the collection list, and we have a class of layout item on each individual item. And within that, I just have an image and an H2. So that is all that's going on there. The two key things to hone in on here is that on layout, I have this combo class of isList, and on layout item, I have this combo class of isList. So this is what's setting our list preference here. You'll notice if I click here, it's set to grid, and I've got just one column, and I've got two rows, but it auto generates the rows, of course. So I'll click done there. And then on layout item, when I have the isList class applied as well, or combo class, I should say, if we look at the grid, we can see that it's a grid just with two columns. I have 0.5 fractional units on the left here and one fractional unit on the right. And then I'm aligning to the bottom. So, that's just going to put our text at the bottom there. And I think so the main thing to show is if I take this isList and I delete that. So now I'm getting kind of a full card effect. And then if I come to layout and delete that combo class, we're getting our grid layout. So just two combo classes to make this switch. And we're going to use JavaScript to programmatically make that switch happen. And then we'll use the GSAP Flip library to animate it. So let me put those back on. I like keeping these combo classes on because if I kept them off and then go to like clean up styles, then it'll clean them up and they'll go away and then our code won't know about it. So just keep those. If you're using combo classes and kind of remove or toggling combo classes to do this, then you're going to want to keep those on. So that's everything for Webflow that I want to touch on before I hop into the code. Okay, so I just turned off the serving the code here, but I'm going to move it. This is just the Finsweet, what is it called? Developer Starter. So if I come to the README, yeah, Finsweet Developer Starter. And I have PNPM installed on my machine already with this command, but we need to run PNPM install to install everything within this package. So this is installing all the stuff that we need to run the Finsweet, what's it called? Finsweet Developer Starter. And now I'm just also going to say PNPM install GSAP. Let me zoom in a little bit down here. Hopefully y'all can see that. And that's going to install GSAP into our project. So I'll come over. Don't get scared. There's like a lot of text going on here, I know. But all of our work, we're going to be doing in this source and then in index TS. So if I save, and then also next in the README tells us how to run this thing, PNPM dev. It's much more readable if you read it actually on GitHub, PNPM dev. And so now we're serving our code on our local host on port 3000. That's just my computer. And this is where the code is being served. So localhost/index.js. And you can see in Webflow here, that's what I am loading here. So I don't need to save and publish because it's already, Webflow already knows to look for that code. But if I save now and come back to the project, let's refresh. This button doesn't work anymore. And if I open up console, we'll see hello, John Doe, and the site was last published February 13th, 2023. Okay, let's come back to the code. I'm going to close down the README. So we're seeing this code. Let's walk through what we've got. Import greet user from utils/greet, window.webflow. This is like or equals an empty array. And then all this is saying is that once Webflow is ready, and once all of our content has loaded on the page, let's push some code to Webflow that we want to run. And we saw that we were greeting this user, John Doe. So we don't need this, so I'm going to delete that. And we don't need this, so I'm going to delete that. But we do need GSAP, so I'll say import GSAP. We don't need GSAP trial, we want GSAP here. And we actually don't even need GSAP yet, so I'll comment that out because the first thing we want to do is just toggle that class of isList when we press the button, right? So let me make sure so first thing we need to do is we need to get the button. So I'll say const flip button equals document.query selector. And then within quotes, I'm going to say given an ID of flip button, because that's what the ID was on the Webflow page. And then we want to add an event listener to flip button for the click event. So I'll say flip button dot add event listener. And this takes two arguments. It takes a click and it takes a function to run when we click. So this is just the syntax for an empty function. And then we'll write all our code within these two curly brackets here. I heard Aaron call them sideways mustaches on stream the other day. I thought that was great. And we'll just console log button clicked. Okay. And so now if I come back to our code and I refresh, then when I click this button, you'll see I'm getting this button clicked over here. So great. We know how to make code run when we click a button. Now we know that we want to, when we initially load the page, this is going to, we have those two items with the isList combo class on it right here. So when we click the button, we want to toggle this class. So let's go back to our code. And we need to get that layout. So the first thing we can say is const layout equals document.query selector. And now we're going to be targeting with a CSS selector of class. So we'll put a period and then I will say layout. And this corresponds, if I just click on back over to Webflow here, this layout, this whole list, right? So that div. And go back here. And what we want to do is we want to say layout.classlist.toggle. And we're going to toggle the class of isList. But we also need to toggle the class isList on all of the children elements. So if I come back to the page here, you see, the class of layout has all these children, these collection items. So I'm going to show you how we're going to use a for each loop to remove the class from all those. So we'll say layout dot child nodes dot for each. So with this, and then for each is essentially a function that takes a function. So it gets a parameter of each child. So now we're able to access each child of layout. And I'm writing a function here. So this is called fat arrow syntax. And then we have our sideways mustaches. And what I want to do is I want to say child dot class list, but my autocomplete's not working right here. So I should have mentioned that I'm coding in TypeScript right now. And so there may be a couple things. I'm coding in TypeScript mainly for the autocomplete that I can get. You can actually just write JavaScript within TypeScript and not write a wink of TypeScript. I'm actually not going to write any TypeScript in this tutorial, so don't be nervous about that. But when you do have TypeScript, sometimes it'll say like, okay, this is of a type node, but I know that this is actually a div. So something I can do to get around that is say, let child element equal child as HTML div element. And now when I say class list, I was hoping it would autocomplete, but it's not going to. But if I hover over this, Oh, that's because I need to actually use the child element. So child element dot class list. Now it gets class list for me because TypeScript knows that this is going to be an HTML div element because I've told it, hey, this thing's going to be a div, and I know that. Dot toggle, and then we'll say is list. And I will save that. And now let's come back to our code and see what we get. When I click flip, notice we're switching from grid to list just every time we click the button. And if you look over on the right side of the screen here in the inspector, we're adding is list and we're removing it from all those items each time we click. So we've made it through step one. We've got some code that's working. We're not animated yet. Okay, so let's bring GSAP back into the equation here. And if I just console log GSAP, GSAP is just an object that has a bunch of extra methods and stuff on top of it. So I can show you that we have GSAP here in the console. Look at all this stuff, right? We're going to actually use this register plugin function down here to register our Flip plugin, and we need to install it as well. So let's come back here. Actually, let's go back to the GreenSock installation page. And we want to get this Flip plugin. And now this is showing us how to load it in CDN, but I'm using NPM. So I'm going to click there. And we need to import Flip from GSAP/Flip. So I'll copy paste actually both of these, come back to the code here and paste. My other goal is just to show you how I use the documentation. Like I don't remember how to do all this stuff. I look at the documentation every time. And if they update the version, then I'll know if it changes, that sort of thing. So hopefully, you should be able, the goal is for you to be able to do this yourself without having to watch tutorials all the time. Okay, so we have brought in Flip, and now let's go to the Flip documentation. I've already kind of talked about this feature right here. Here's all the features of the Flip plugin. I'll let you read through those on your own if you want to. Here's a simple example of just swapping two elements using the Flip plugin. Here's kind of their changing flex direction with GSAP's flips change. This is kind of similar, very similar to the example that we'll be building. Notice they applied a little stagger here so that the elements animate one after another. And then here's an advanced example where you click on a picture and it shows you kind of this, I don't know, stuff about a dog, stuff about a hipster dog with glasses. I chose dinosaurs instead of animals. Okay. Usage. This is our bread and butter for how to get the Flip animation working. So first thing I want to do is let's just review this. What you do is you kind of get state of how your elements are on the page and you store them in this variable called state. And then you can make any state changes. This is, notice this element.classlist.toggle. This is exactly what we're doing, right? You could also append something somewhere else on the DOM when DOM is the document object. So that means like you could come into Webflow and you could write some JavaScript that moves this H1 over, I don't, wherever you want to move it here, and it would animate that for you. But that's what it means when it's talking about making state changes. And it says perform DOM edits, styling updates, add, remove classes, whatever is necessary to get things in their final states. And then lastly, we're going to say flip.from or flip.to. .from and .to are GSAP kind of animation syntax. And then we pass it that state that we stored up here and an options. And the options can be, we can specify the duration, the ease, and then a lot of other options that they have down here in the properties. Anyways, let's get to animating this thing. So I'm going to just copy and paste this code that we have right here, come into the project. And where do we want to store this state? So here we're doing our null checking, and we want to do this once the user clicks the button, right? So let's just copy and paste that there. And now we need to get our targets. So our targets are going to be, what do we want to target? Layout, and we want to target layout item. Let me just double check what we're doing here. Yep. And then now we're doing our, so set GSAP flip state. Step 2, perform DOM edits. We're just toggling those classes. And lastly, we need to perform flip animation. So let's come back here. God, I keep clicking on the wrong one. Okay, so I'm going to grab this back. And so we're animating from that state that we saved up here. Duration 1, we don't need an onComplete function, so I'll just delete that. We don't need absolute. Let's see what this gives us out of the box. Come back. Let's see. Okay, refresh. Yeah, you notice this isn't quite working like we want it to, right? Something else we need to do is that in state, we are only storing layout and layout item. We also want to animate our image and our H2. So let's pass those in as well. So that's a class of image, and I think it's a class of H2. And save. Oh man, running into some coding issues. Let's see what's wrong. You know what it is this get state is a function, and we can see it takes targets, and it takes a GSAP DOM target. Now, if I come to the docs, let me see. Use selector text, an element, an array of elements, or a node list. So I want to use an array of elements. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just passing one argument, comma separated. So I just need to wrap that in these brackets to signify that it's an array. So if I save and come back, now we've got our flip layout working. I did want to show this error if I didn't include these. So let me cut these and save. And you know, it's so great having this hot reload. I'm not used to it. But you can see the animation looks a bit broken because we didn't pass those other classes in. So the GSAP, it doesn't know that it has to animate the image and the text as well. And now I've added those back and I'm flipping and it's all working. So, okay, we've made it to V1, right? So we're pushing this code, but there's things we can do to improve. I'm going to move on and we're going to do match media, because it's more GSAP and I love GSAP. The quick plug for the forums in GSAP, like the guys here are really helpful. It's better than Stack Overflow. If you're learning, they're really kind, and yeah, just like I've gotten so much help from them. Okay, so we can use GSAP.matchMedia. Lets you tuck setup code into a function that only executes when a particular media query matches and when it no longer matches. Don't care about any of this other stuff, but let's start looking at some examples that they have. So basic syntax, you can see that they're creating this match media variable using GSAP.matchMedia, and then they're adding a media query, which is min width of 800 pixels, to run a function when it matches that media query. So I think it was Spencer talked about this. Yeah, let's use it for the reduced motion preference first. And so that structure, and they give you some examples here, but I'm actually going to use conditional syntax, which is a bit more powerful. So, but not too much different, but we're going to kind of use this as our guide, and we're going to get to it right now. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to copy this line of code, come back here. Actually, let's do this inside this here. I can get rid of this console log GSAP. Define match media variable. This is like redundant comments, definitely not needed. Sometimes I feel the urge to just comment the heck out of my code. Okay, makes me feel like I'm, I don't know, helping out more. So essentially what we want to do is when we only want to run this bit of code, which is performing the animation, when our reduced motion preference is no preference. So let's go ahead and let me see where I want to add this bit of code. I want to do it after all this stuff, right? So I'll say matchmedia.add, and we have all this stuff that we don't want, lots of red. Let's delete this. We don't need this. Don't need this. And we are going to use this return statement, so I'll leave that in there. But we've got our reduced motion, and then we also want one for full motion. Actually, I wanted to copy paste this. So copy, and this will be no preference. So now we know, and this context object or this context variable is what's going to know full motion or reduced motion. We can access it by equal context dot conditions. So here we're destructuring full motion off of context dot conditions. This might be a little bit confusing, so let's console log context dot conditions. And then what we want to do is, so we're saying match media dot add context. Now we want to define our on click function. So I'm going to say const on click equals an anonymous function, or it's not anonymous because I named it right here, but it's just right now this is an empty function. And what we're going to do is we're going to add all of our code that we already wrote right within there. So I don't want to add the event listener in there, but I want to add everything within that event listener. So I'm just going to cut this and I'm going to come to my on click and paste it there. And if I save, I get some nice auto formatting. So we've got our on click function defined within this match media dot add kind of syntax. Let's come back and we still need to add this event listener. So let's cut that, but we need to add it within this match media context. So I'm defining the function. Let's define it right after the function. We're adding the event listener on click, and rather than an empty function that we have here, we want to pass on a reference to on click. So on click is a function that we've defined up here, and all of this code runs on click. Now we need to actually look at these conditions. So I console logged context.conditions. Let's see what that looks like. I have reduce motion false, full motion true. So I'm getting these values within this function scope, I would say. So you look at this little yellow sideways mustache and this little yellow sideways mustache. I know what the user's preference is within here. And let's just see what happens when I flip it. Flip the switch, reduce motion. Now it's reduce motion is true and full motion is false. Flip it back, false, true. So pretty cool. Now we know about the user's preference. So let's make something happen or not happen based on that preference. So what I can say is just an if statement, if context dot conditions dot full motion sideways mustaches, and I'm just going to bring that up in there. And look, we're getting an error. It's possibly undefined. Hey, I know it's not undefined, so I'm going to put some optional shading there and save. And we're getting our full motion here, but let's open up settings, add reduce motion, and it's broken. It's not working. What do we do? Now it's working because I didn't refresh. Let's make sure that that's still working. Uh-oh, something's broken here. So you see it's animating, but it's breaking our layout. So let me investigate. You know what it is we're adding this event listener, and we need to also remove this event listener within this function. So let's see if that fixes it. It might not actually. So, okay, we're working with full motion. If we reduce motion, it's working. It does work. Okay. So what's happening here is that we were adding, it's good. It's always good to see these errors, right? And how we work through them is I'm adding the event listener for click and running the code, but these guys are pretty persistent. Like they will live on the page forever. So even when I was toggling to the reduce motion, the event listener for this still existed. So we were having some conflicts with that. You can look at event listeners that exist on your code. So the button has the event listener. If I click on event listeners here, trying to toggle this up. We want where's the click? Mouse down. You can see there's none there. Oh no, click up here. So you can see this is the one we've written here. And if you would watch this, I don't know, let's watch it when we don't add this. What happens? And refresh that. And now let's toggle our settings. I was thinking something else would show up, but did I not toggle it? Anyways, this is how you can kind of look at a lot of times you won't add the event listener or you won't remove it. And that's kind of how I would debug that. Let's bring this back so that it's working. So we have reduce motion, click here. And now we have full motion. Okay. Local storage it's not related to GSAP. It's a web API similar to session storage. Let's see, read-only property of the window interface that allows you to access a storage object from the document's origin. Stored data is saved across browser sessions. So it's just a way of saving a little bit of data about our code, essentially. I'm going to kind of go through this pretty quickly, and then maybe we can explain it. But the first thing I'm going to want to do is come down here and we'll say let layout pref. So this is the user's layout pref equals local storage dot get item, and we'll call it something like layout pref. I'm just making this up. This is I'm specifying this. This isn't something that actually normally exists, because so if I get it and it doesn't exist, then I know the user has no layout preference. But if they do, then I'm going to want to load a different layout kind of thing. So let me get this block of code here. And what I'm saying is if layout preference, so if there's a layout preference, and I actually want to define this under layout because I'm doing my null check there, right? So we'll define it down here. If the user has a layout preference, then we want to change it to that grid layout. Our list is the default. So we're just rerunning that same code. We could put this in its own function. Once you're rewriting code, you probably want to do that. But for this example, we'll just keep it as is here. Then we'll toggle the is list, and we'll do the same thing, toggling the is list on each one. So that's if the layout preference exists. Otherwise, we're essentially doing nothing. But we need, when we run that, when we click the button, we need to actually set that as well. And the way we can do that is in Flip here, we use onComplete. And if I hover, so it takes a callback, which is just a function to run once our animation has completed. And within that, I'm going to perform the logic for setting our layout preference. So layout pref, this is accessing that variable that's all the way up here. And I can change it because I used this let syntax instead of const. If I used const, it would say, hey, you can't do that because you can't change something with a const declaration. Anyways, if we do have one now, then we're just going to remove it so it doesn't exist. Otherwise, we're going to set it to grid, and then we will store it in this layout pref variable. So if I save and come back and now refresh, and we can watch our local storage in console with this application tab, and I come here, and if let's see, do I need to refresh? Uh-oh, not seeing it. So let's do a little bit of debugging. Maybe it is working since it's like not, I was able to console log and that was working. But for some reason, it's not showing up in my DevTools. Do I have a filter on or something? Let me reset my DevTools. I just reset it before this, but. Come to application. Oh, there it is. Just had to reset DevTools. So you can see we have test and grid in there. I think it was actually just working that whole time. I just had something wrong. All right. And now when we're back in the list mode, we see we have no layout preference key and no value. And when we do click it, it stores it as grid. And if I copy this and open a new tab, it's automatically set to grid already, even though the default is as a list. Hey, everybody. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. If you have more GSAP questions, drop them in the comments below. Would love to see that. Would love to make more videos for you. And don't forget to kiss your Valentine. All right, everybody. Bye.